announcement on all streaming platforms and Patreon. Yeah. We have a special guest. Please introduce yourself.
Well, hello. My name is Cheniqua Johnson, and I am a St. Paul City Council member on the east side of St. Paul in Ward 7. East side.
That's right. We grew up on the east side. It's Harding.
Oh, that's dope. My husband graduated from Harding, too.
Yeah. So, okay. Election day is coming up. Currently it's November 2nd.
2 days, we're like, 3 days in, 3 days away. Mm-hmm. Woof.
So, yeah, before we get into the questions I sent you, I just want to know, what's your thoughts and what you're seeing out there in, the political side of things.
I think right now we're really looking at an election that every vote is going to count. I don't think anybody has it in the bag. We literally have elections that I think, we have candidates we've seen in the past, presidential candidates who win the popular vote but then don't win the election, who win the election but don't win the popular vote. This year, this is the year that I think a lot of people are going to be, what you're seeing now, even behind me, the people making phone calls, people door knocking, because every single vote is going to matter, for sure.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So my first question for you is, how would you describe the importance of voting in this election?
I think that for me, voting is kind of my key to both being able to complain when I'm not satisfied with somebody, but also to actually decide who's going to lead this nation for the next 4 years. We have more people on the ballot this year than just the president. There are senators, our state reps are up, and I think sometimes even some of our ballot initiatives here for the local races. But it's just really important that people see their vote as a tool to hold people accountable. That increased accountability for elected officials, I think, is vital in every election. But when we stay at home, I think sometimes we think that's because, if we stay at home, we don't like the person, we don't like the candidates or whatever, and that somehow, is going to impact things. And I think in reality, it actually does the opposite. Sometimes that's a community that they don't come and door knocking. They're not necessarily going to spend a lot of resources in. And it's why? Because we all should be, vocalizing our voice. To me, that is our tool. And historically, they tried to keep people like you and I from voting. They tried to prevent us from voting. And that, there's still people alive to this day that know what it was like to not be able to go to the polls and cast their ballot, that know what it was like to have to choose, should I stay home with my family and be safe, or literally try to risk my life to go place a vote. Now, why would they do that if it wasn't important? So I just think it's really important. I think voting in this election, really in any election, is important. But this one in particular, I feel like we're really at a crossroads as a nation, for sure.
Absolutely. You kind of already answered my next question, too. But I wanted your opinion on, what would you say to people that believes voting doesn't make a difference? They don't really care. They don't like either candidate. What would you say to those people?
I would say that I would encourage people who are like that. And first, let me just say, if you are in a space where you're like, what, I don't think my vote matters, that's not by an accident. That's not, there's multiple reasons why people may feel that way. Sometimes they're even told, this is the election that it doesn't really matter. It's the presidential seat. It's, we don't know who they are. But then I remind people, right, last year, I was on the ballot for the city council seat. I won by 136 votes. Right. So we were pulling people at 7:50 p.m. Polls are open at 8 a.m. and they close at 8 p.m. on election day. We were literally pulling people from their apartment doors, taking them in the car at 7:45. We brought our last voter at 7:57, and I stood with him in line. And one of the reasons was because literally this apartment door, I knocked it. He was like, "Do you really think my vote is going to matter?" And I was like, I do. It meant something to me. There are people who are on the ballot whom we do know. It's not just about the president or the vice president. Well, in this case, in Minnesota, we do actually know who the vice president is because he's our governor, but it's not always the case. Sometimes we've never met these people. I was telling my husband, this is the first presidential candidate. I've met Kamala on 3 different occasions. That's the first time in my lifetime that's ever happened. I often vote for presidential candidates, having not met them in person. But then when it gets to the senators, the judges, the local city elections, the school board folks, I actually know who they are. I've been in their house. Some of this stuff is also relative, but that's where, for people who are my vote doesn't necessarily matter, I remind them of the times when multiple elections are decided sometimes by one person. That one person who stayed home, or even, in some places I think around the country, there was one person who forgot to vote for himself and he lost his election. And so, like, in big spaces, I can understand why it might feel like that vote doesn't matter. But even going to the elections and putting your voice on a piece of paper, it does matter. And a lot of people who kind of are like, well, why? Why does it matter? Because none of these people can get elected without us. Like, genuinely, you can't get elected with 0 votes. So if we're putting you over, if we're saying, hey, I want you to represent me, and that person wins by a small margin or even a big margin. For me, it's 136 votes. I will never forget all the people who turned out to vote for me, because without them, I wouldn't be here. People who were pulling their family members, their cousins, their aunts, young people who were literally telling their parents to vote. That's the only reason why I'm a city council now.
That's dope.
Yeah.
First of all, that's amazing, by the
Thank
way.
you.
I love that. So, okay, you kind of talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to talk about, like, you now, specifically.
Yeah.
And, Ward 7, the east side here. So how important is family and community to you for Ward 7?
I mean, family is everything to me. And community, for me, on the east side, is so vital to, like, what we've actually been able to see. The east side of St. Paul is different in the sense that, we have a lot of mom and pop shops. We have a lot of folks that truly started their business on their back and have been doing this for decades. We don't have a lot of chains. We don't have a lot of places that are with multimillionaires, and if they are, they're self-made. It's a complete different type of scenario where even growing up in Southwest Minnesota, I'm originally from Worthington, Minnesota, which is like a town of 13,000 people. And you fast forward to now, I represent a ward that's 3 to 4 times my hometown. But one of the reasons why I decided to move here in the first place or even live on the east side of St. Paul was because it reminded me a lot of that family and community space that I came from. I wanted to walk down a street. I wanted to have a place where I could get my hair done, a place where I could go to church, a place where I could send my future kids to school, and a place where I felt safe all in the same block. And that, for me, was really important. And I think that that's because I genuinely wouldn't be here without my mom, my brother, my dad, and I would not even be able to look like I do today without my husband, who's been heavily with me side by side on this political journey, because he doesn't do politics either. He's an accountant. He's like, I do numbers, but I do not like politics or anything. But he's been along for the ride with me, and it's meant a lot. And for somebody who's comes from a small family, my extended family, my friends, my mentors, people who have kind of taken me under their wing, is the only reason why I'm able to be 29 and think that I, could have the thought of actually running for office or looking in the mirror and really deciding that I was going to be our next city council person. And I wouldn't be here without my community. And it was the people, like the thousands of voters that put me here, because they also saw something different in me and where my heart lies, but also like they trusted me. They trusted me with our community, and that's a real honor.
Absolutely, I appreciate that answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's your proudest accomplishment so far being in city council?
I would say my proudest accomplishment as a city council person is just being able to really discover what my voice is as an elected official. This first year was a lot of learning, and if I'm being honest, the first 6 months in office, I was like, what the bleep did I do? Like, what is going on? There was so much stuff happening. Like, elections happen, but the world doesn't stop. So you get into a new job and you basically have to put on the training wheels or something, because we had all types of stuff happen right in the first few months. Yeah. And there was a lot of excitement because we're a part of an all-women council. A lot of the leaders are under 40. 6 of the 7 of the council members were all women of color. But we were a lot of firsts. Like, I was the first woman of color elected in Ward 7, the first person of color to represent us as a city council through winning an election and not being appointed. But also the second Black woman, tied to be the second Black woman with Councilmember Bowie in St. Paul history to be a city council person. And that's a lot. that's heavy. That was a lot to learn rather quickly because people had expectations that we would come in and we would fix some of the things that we said we were going to fix. And I think part of that has just been making sure that I learned my job, advocated for the places that I wanted to be on, the committees I wanted to be on. But I think I'm really proud of myself looking back now, right? We're coming up on the elections. So that means it's been a little under a year since I knew that I would be our next city council person. And the biggest thing I wanted to do is make my community proud and make them feel like they solidified their decision when they voted for me. And I hope that I've been able to do that. And I know for me, it's just been about both proving to myself not only that like I can be a city council person, but that I can do this job.
Absolutely. That's so dope, actually. Okay. So like I said, I wanted to kind of discuss you a little bit while we have you here for your time. So who's somebody that personally inspired you in your journey?
I have a few people, but, I think Rena Moran and Keith Ellison locally, the two of them are solid. Rena is truly like the aunt that I never had, and Keith has quickly become both a mentor but a genuine friend when it comes to politics. Like if Rena calls, you got to pick up the phone, you got to come out, you got to do whatever she's telling you to do. She's been one of the few people that I consistently just really followed her path over the last few years. Growing up, I didn't have a Rena Moran in my life. Like I didn't have a Black woman figure that was in politics, that had served as a state rep, that knew how to govern. But also, like, Rena gets stuff done. Like, she moves things that seem impossible to move, policies that people genuinely didn't want to touch. A lot of her legacy is still being felt at the state legislature, even after she's gone. And you see how that impacts people, everyday people like me, like you, like her daughter who's now working on the presidential elections. It's just the aura that's around both of them. It supersedes, like, any position that they hold. It's the impact that they have. A lot of people know Rena, a lot of people know Keith, and it's not just like, oh, they're really great. No, we have respect for, in this case for my elders, but like in this case for sure, just I hope that I can look back and have as many things to be proud of as Rena has, many community members standing up for me like Keith does in this work and beyond.
Definitely. And then last question before we let you go. What goals do you want to accomplish for the rest of 2024 and then going into 2025?
I think for me, I have one goal yet this year and next year, and that's really like I want to build. I ran on the East Side as an organizer, and I really want to build our East Side base. I think that we should feel really strongly that these jobs like city council, county commissioner, school boards, senators, like they're not retirement plans. Like people really should be running to run themselves out of a job. I really think that sometimes the problems with politics is that people stay in office way too long. And it's not to say that, you're here 1 minute, you're not the next, but isn't there something to be said for building up the community so the next person doesn't have to start from scratch when you leave or when you're a part of it? Like, I think that that's super important. And so 2024, 2025 for me and my office is about, like, how do we set the steps up to where our legacy, like I said earlier, like supersedes what we're doing now. We have policies that probably I won't see come into action, but we should start them. Even if people aren't ready right now, they might be in 4 years. This is a guarantee. Like, we are not on the ballot. City council is not on the ballot again until at least 3 years from now, and depending on how the local ballot goes, it could be 4 years, but that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time to start to set the path for all the things that we want to accomplish. The affordable housing developments that are talked about now won't be built until 2027, 2028. The streets and the roads that we're seeing, all this construction that East Side's filling. Listen, it should be done tomorrow, but it's like, it might take like 2, 3, 4 years for that to be done. And the question is like, I want to be able to drive around my city, around my neck of the woods and see all of the things we started now actually get finished up 2026, 2027. So it's right now we're making out a roadmap of like What is it that we want to make sure we accomplish in the next 3 to 4 years? And what are the things that we have to start now that won't even touch the surface, but need to begin? So if there is another person, or if my community sends me back, that there's actually somebody advocating for the things I talked about. Public safety is not going to be fixed in 4 years. We're still going to see the things we have, but we can pass gun laws right now. We can talk about our kids and our young people in our schools right now. We can talk about the increase in why we need street funding and park funding and library funding and all of the things, youth programs. We can advocate to try to have a swimming pool on the east side right now. Those are things that, like, genuinely we need somebody advocating and somebody pushing for. And I'm just looking to make sure that that's me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that so much. So before we let you go, I just want to know, how can they support you, the cause and everything like that, and what should they be looking out for next?
I mean, there's like 3 things people can do, and I would say, just because we're heading up to an election, the first thing right now is voting. Like, you cannot love me or support me and get out there and vote for anybody else other than Kamala Harris, but whatever. That's my thought. But like right now I remember in 2016 how I felt the day after the elections. And that was when Donald Trump was first elected. And I think that people underestimate, this isn't just like another presidential election. No, this man would have immunity as the president to act at criminal activities. As long as he's serving as the president, right, he'd get away from it, because now the Supreme Court said that you're above the law if you're the president. That's crazy. Not only do I think he's an idiot, but I genuinely am just like, we have a lot of things that we want to see in our community, and none of them, he hasn't talked, in my eyes, he's not talking about the things that matter the most to me and mine. So like, if you're, looking for ways to get involved in this election, there's still time. No matter when this airs, there's still time in a space of like, if you don't know who represents you, like, look us up. I'm here. That's the other thing. As a city council person, I literally live on the east side. I'm a Dayton's Bluff resident. I'm right here in St. Paul, and I'm not going anywhere. So, show up. We have meetings every Wednesday, 3:30. If you're, looking for something after the day, I have evening events that happen, and we put them on Facebook, Instagram, X/Twitter. Show up. It's really hard to do your job in an empty room. And at the same time, sometimes like it's nice that community members come and they ask us questions. I love when somebody shows up at our office hours, 12 to 1 on Fridays at Storehouse Grocers, just to talk about a laundry list of things that they want me to get done. I'm just glad they showed up. Like, that's that. And I think the third thing is, like, as I told you, sometimes people forget that politicians are everyday people. And something as simple as like, if you have my number, which most people can find it at this point, call it, check on me, show up and be with me. Give me your feedback, like, talk to me. I think that's really, really important, because there's a lot of stuff happening. And, I think when things go bad or someone is in trouble, right, we pay attention then. And then it's like, oh, like, what did they do? Why did they do that? But when things are going good, we tend to just like kind of check away. We've had a lot of excitement about being city council members, and we've had a lot of interviews, a lot of community support. Just don't forget we're here. Show up, reach out and let us know if there's something that you'd like us to do better or to do more of.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Bluehill podcast on all streaming platforms.